I don't know where I fit in. I don't think any party really speaks to me, and I haven't found my place yet. I just know that I feel like there's like this, like even my mom says to me sometimes, like she'll be like, you know, that these Republicans, they're trying to take away your rights. And it's like, I know when it comes to trans stuff, the liberals are always going to, you know, be pro-trans in that instance. But maybe there's some other stuff that I don't agree with. Like, I don't feel like it feels wrong that I have to be locked into the certain stance, that I have to always feel a certain way when it's like, I don't want to be defined by like one issue. But when it's my rights on the line, it's important. It's just this weird tug of war. I don't know how to feel.
You could always be
It's
a socialist
it's a
and
lot.
break the line.
Hey, I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I did in the email. I'm like half Cuban. My mom, her parents escaped from Cuba when Fidel rose to power. So I don't think I'll ever fall in line. I do. Here's the thing, though. I think when it comes to like what we actually believe, I kind of believe in a lot of the same stuff. I think that minimum wage needs to be increased. I think workers deserve more rights. So you think, oh, well, you do think, no, I'm not a socialist. I do believe that like capitalism should still exist. I think, you know, businesses shouldn't go away. I think that there's a lot of regulations that need to be put on businesses so that they act better and that, you know, the average American lives a better life. But I don't call myself a socialist because I think that that's just capitalism done better. So you know what I'm saying? And I don't want to,
like
like, Cuba is
super
really bad. I
capitalism,
don't want
perhaps?
America to ever become like that.
Super capitalism, perhaps? I'm a big fan of super capitalism.
Well, what I'm saying is that the way that capitalism is being run is a huge problem because, you know, a lot of average Americans are suffering while these CEOs are like profiting and they're like super greedy. And because of these problems, they're turning to socialism because it's so bad. They think that capitalism is the problem. We need to throw it away. When I think the reality is we need a better form. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
I don't think you'd agree. Oh,
No, no,
really?
no. I
Okay.
think one of the most important things that we can do to improve capitalism is to really double down on the incentive structure of production and innovation that makes capitalism so valuable. I think one of the best things we can do to achieve this is to ensure that every business is owned collectively by the workers who produce there. Because that way, all of the workers have a collective incentive to maximize the effectiveness of their business. Super capitalism.
Okay, so I feel like that's the thing that I think you're trying to trick me into like the workers, the means. I think you're trying to trick me into some Marxist stuff.
No,
I
no, no,
just
no,
I
no.
want I want to know what you mean when you say that though, because we have to. I think we're fighting a fine line of like, you know, there's a certain point. It's like I don't think the CEO should be making the exact same as the average worker, but I don't think the average worker should be making $10 an hour. I think they need to be making a living wage. I
Um,
think I think there's a fine line in between there where you can find a beautiful harmony that works.
Well, of course, I am a socialist, which means that the ideal society, or at least the society that I would like to work towards, you know, it's always more complicated than that, is one where the commodity form has been abolished. That is to say, goods are no longer produced for the purpose of selling them. And additionally, where you have a democratization of the means of production. So the means of production are controlled collectively by the people, or by the working class. And I think one of the most effective ways to move in that direction is to push for a worker cooperative economy, which is generally referred to as market socialism, though there's a bit more to it than that. And I think that would be one of the steps that we could take. Not all worker cooperatives are flat in terms of their pay, like everyone gets paid the same, but the most essential feature is that there is a democratic structure within the company. Most companies are autocratic by nature. You know, you don't really have a way of second guessing or checking what the boss does or says. So a worker cooperative allows for some level of democracy, whether that be voting on issues or voting in managers.
Okay, I do think that workers should probably have more say in their place. I think, you know, they should have more say than they currently get. I don't think they should have all the say. I do think that there's upper management roles for a reason, but they should have more say than they currently do. I think that that is a problem and that is a thing that is happening. And when it comes to selling goods, though, I think people, you know, if you say, oh, well, no one's doing it for profit, I think that, you know, when people sell things for profit, they're basically giving people more of what they want. So, you know, people say that these companies are so evil, but it's like the problem is because they're making money, the fact that they're making money incentivizes them to make the things that people want. And it incentivizes people to be like, oh, I'm going to make this thing that, you know, it's going to benefit people's lives because it's going to make me rich as well. I think it's a mutual benefit in this case. And I think
Well,
there are goods to capitalism. There's also bads to capitalism, and we have to regulate those so that, you know, it's more tolerable.
Well, they're not giving anyone anything, right? They're selling. But it really depends on the market we're talking about, right? So when we talk about decommodification, there are things in America that are already decommodified to an extent. In some cities, there's decommodified transport and travel, where it's managed by the city. There are countries where decommodified housing initiatives exist. Medical care, decommodified to an extent when you have Medicaid, to the extent at least the government is capturing a portion of its interests. I think that when we talk about decommodification, the first things we need to work on decommodifying are elements of industry where the supply-demand curve doesn't function that well. Because oftentimes it's more profitable to do something that's just worse socially, and there's also not really a need for consumer choice. For example, medical care. Consumer choice doesn't exist for medical care the same way it does for other things, because nobody goes shopping around for like a surgery to have done on them. Emergency services are done at the closest hospital to you because that is where you need to go immediately. And usually you're just looking for some very basic medical supervision over some issue that you have to get a prescription. But it's not like you don't like shop around hospital to hospital for the most part. Usually because hospitals don't have to make their prices public. So decommodification can be effective there. Housing industry. You have massive housing crises in large cities because the state or the local government is preventing companies from building out more housing because housing realtors want to keep the relative price of houses high so they can sell them at a higher price. And existing homeowners don't want the evaluation of their housing price to go down by the existence of new houses to be built. So like you have instances where the supply demand shit just doesn't work that well. You have inelastic markets. So we can test decommodification there. Other countries already have. It's been effective, and I think that's a good way to start in that direction. I'm okay with an incremental approach towards these things insofar as it gives us data to work with.
Okay. Oh, wow. There's a lot I need to cover. I've been writing down these notes. I would say, okay, where do I even start? When it comes to these medical things specifically, right? I want to mention a personal story I have, right? I have relatives in Cuba. I have a relative in Cuba who has cancer, and my mom literally had to fly to Cuba to get the medicine from the United States because even though their healthcare was free, they didn't have really good healthcare. And that's the issue. It's like they didn't have these drugs that we needed to save her life. So, all the time people say, and the US medical system is not perfect. It's a problem. A lot of people who are poor can't afford medical care and they die. And that's an awful thing that should not be happening in a first world country. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that, there are people coming from other countries. And a lot of these countries, they have these long lines. I've even heard of cases where it's like people are assigned a doctor and it's like, this is, your free doctor, but this is the doctor you get. And it might not be the best doctor. But Americans, you have to pay more, but there's a choice. And I always get the assumption, if you're rich in this country, it's better. But if you're poor in this country, it's worse. So it's like it's probably worse for most people, but it's when it's good, it's really good. So, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that,
You
but
don't
I
choose.
think there's some positive. You don't choose.
The insurance chooses, right? Also, the reason they had to go to America to get that drug is probably because of the U.S. embargo on Cuba. Cuba has really good medical outcomes, but you can't really blame it for not having like some types of drugs because the country is not wealthy enough to have the massive pharmaceutical companies America has. If it weren't for the embargo, they could probably just buy the drugs. For the amount of money Cuba has, their medical outcomes are astonishingly high. If it weren't for the embargo, they probably would be wealthier and would probably have access to better medicine as well. There's so many doctors there that they export them, which is pretty crazy. In terms of like choice, I don't think the average American like really chooses anything meaningful about their healthcare, or like the choice we're getting is superficial. People care about like keeping their doctor, but like what most people need for their medical checkups is like regular checkups, urgent care, emergency care. Emergency care, nobody gets a choice. You get shunted off to the nearest emergency care usually. Urgent care, you just have like an issue that you need taken care of. You don't really even need like your doctor. You can just get anyone to look at it usually. And then for general checkups, like it's like a once a year thing, Most people like I feel like a lot of people pay like fucking billions of dollars on their medical care and they barely get anything in return for it. Even people who have medical insurance pay out the ass for it, and they often can't even choose the hospitals they want because insurance doesn't cover all hospitals always, or not all hospitals take all insurance. And then the pricing, they still kick in after, and then you have to meet the fucking minimum before the insurance kicks in. It's a nightmare, This is a system where decommodification is just perfect. Standardized care, get rid of the insurance system, because it's non-elastic. There's no limit to what a person will pay for insulin, which means that there's no limit that a company's willing to charge for it, theoretically, outside external factors. Because you can't just not have insulin, right?
Absolutely, you need to have insulin, and that's a problem. Like, you had Martin Shkreli like raising the price all the time. People are like praising him. It's like, no, this dude did an awful thing. Yeah, these life-saving drugs are so vital and so important. They shouldn't be bankrupting people. I think that that's a fair thing. I think most people would agree.
Welcome to
Maybe not
socialism.
everybody.
You're no longer allowed to vote, and you have to buy a gun.
No, I did not
Kalashnikov
say
style,
that.
nice wooden stock with a strap over it. Welcome to the club.
No, the problem is that you have these companies artificially raising the prices over because they know that people are so desperate that they'll pay it. It's like, it does not cost that much for these companies to make these drugs, but they're making it cost more because they're greedy and they know they can get away with it. I think that's the problem. I don't think it's socialism. I think make them more affordable so that they don't make people break the bank. I think there's a problem with hospitals. I was just reading it just recently that like hospitals will overcharge you, like just add bills because they just get away with it. Like,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. And it's like that, in my opinion, the solution to that is regulate those companies, and nobody's doing it. And it's
Super
like,
capitalism.
why?
I agree.
But that's the thing. I think that we fundamentally disagree. That's like, I think you see that and you say throw it all away. When I say I think that it means we need more regulations to make the system better.
Well, the problems that exist in the medical industry are a very visible facsimile of issues that exist broadly in our economy, especially in markets which should be decommodified. Housing is in a similar situation. Right now in the United States, the aggregate, what is the median rent in the United States? Isn't it it's like nearing 2,000 or something, but the median income in the US is something like 50 or 60,000, which means that the like the proportion you're supposed to spend a third of your income or less on rent, like the proportion, it's getting to the point like Americans can't afford rent in America. And that's the free market at work right there. The free market and local governments work together to restrict access to housing supply, and our government allows foreign investors to, or local investors, it really doesn't matter, to buy up real estate and just sit in it as an investment, to speculate on it rather than to have anyone actually live in there. This can be addressed with policy. But one of the best policies that we could go for, in my personal opinion, is to decommodify the housing market, which has seen limited success in parts of America and in parts of other countries, to have local initiatives to build out additional housing, which are being done exclusively for the betterment of the city and not being done for the, for the profit seeking of the construction companies and realtors.